Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. Nice to see some familiar names and some new names as well. We're just going to give it a minute or two for others to trickle in.
And then as you join, feel free to add to the chat your name, organization, and such to the title to introduce yourself.
Okay, well, while we're waiting for folks to come in, we can get started. Welcome, everyone, to day 2 of King County's 2024 Organics Regional Summit. If you have not done so, or if you're just getting in, please put your name, organization, title in the chats. Quite a few people have already done it, so thank you for that. A few meeting reminders. This meeting is being recorded. Afterwards, it'll be put up on the King County site for folks to revisit. Please make sure, in addition to putting your name and organization in the chat, feel free to change that on your screen as well. You can just hover over your box, and in the corner, there should be a button with 3 dots, and that should give you the option to rename yourself if you'd like. I believe everyone is muted, but please be sure to mute your microphone, especially when presenters are speaking. If you have a question, drop the questions in the chat, and our presenters can get to them later, or we can get back to them during our Q&A session, where you'll also have the opportunity to raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. If you have any technical issues, my colleague Hannah Asmussen is on the line. Feel free to message her directly for anything related to audio or slides, and she'll do her best to help you. And that's all. If you do have any questions, feel free to let us know. Otherwise, I would love to share the agenda for today. We're doing some welcome and introductions. For those who were not here yesterday, I'm Sam Kwok. I'm with C+C, helping King County facilitate the summit today. We'll have a land acknowledgement from Kelsey Bailey from King County. And then our first speaker is Feed 7 Generations and Roma Jean Thomas, Tony Tupufia from Utopia, Washington. And then we'll have a Q&A and break for the first part of our speakers, followed by Heather Trim from Zero Waste Washington, Philip Peters and Winnie O from Renewal Food Bank, and Dave Keeney and Kate Kurtz from King County and Seattle Public Utilities, before following with Q&A and wrap up. After we wrap up the meeting, we will open up breakout rooms with our speakers who are still able to stay on for the rest of the meeting, and everyone will have a choice to select into those breakout rooms to ask questions, network further. And if you're busy, you're also free to hop off and have some of your time back, but we'd like to keep that open for those who like that opportunity. With that, I will pass it off to Kelsey for our land acknowledgement.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sam. To quickly introduce myself, my name is Kelsey Bailey. I use she, her pronouns. Thank you all for being here today. Also, thank you if you were here to join us yesterday. I'm the Organic Circular Economy Program Manager at King County Solid Waste. We have tons of colleagues here from King County that also touch on different organics and materials in our region. So with that, I wanted to start us off with a grounding before we kick off today's summit. Nothing ties us closer to the land than the food and the plants we grow and consume. In the organic sphere, we have a responsibility to take care of the land and the resources it produces. And we have even a greater responsibility to the original stewards of the land, the Duwamish, Muckleshoot, Snoqualmie, Puyallup, Tulalip, and Suquamish tribes. There's immense work to be done to undo past wrongs that force these groups from their ancestral land and diminish their ability to grow and nourish themselves with traditional foods. So, as we move forward, let us remember why we do this work, to not only to conserve the land and the resources, but to also honor and center the past and present stewards of the land and the stewards yet to come. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Kelsey. Next we have our first presenter, Roma Jean. Are you on?
I am.
Take it away.
Thank you. Hotzlahay. Good day, everybody. My name is Roma Jean Thomas. I am a Muckleshoot tribal member. I am also the program director for Feed 7 Generations. I wanted to take a moment this morning to just introduce myself. I am a Muckleshoot tribal member by way of my Duwamish ancestry. So I am a descendant of Cheshiahu, or in English, Lake John. So we're from the Lake John people. So around University of Washington, around Lake Washington. So I come from a family who have been stewards of this land. That's my patriarchal lineage. And my mom is a Port Gamble S'Klallam tribal member. And so she descends from right across the water in the Kingston area, Point Julia. And so I come from a family of stewards of this place. I was grown and raised into knowing that responsibility. I've been told it is my right and my responsibility to steward these places. From as early as I can remember, my family's had me out on the land, remembering and cultivating the gratitude. I come from a people of real generosity and gratitude, and I'm very thankful. And that has really been instilled in me from an early age. Long before I started doing food sovereignty work as an adult, it's really something that I've done within my family and within my community. And so I always carry those gifts and that honor of doing this work since time immemorial. I come from a people who have really been thinking about these issues, right? Cultivation of land, land stewardship, consumption, use of our resources. My earliest lessons were, being on the land and harvesting plants and animals and using every piece of them. I have some signage behind me, and it's always a constant reminder. If we're eating the plants or animals, it's nourishing our body. If we're using the fiber from it, we're honoring the entire food system. So I really wanted to ground in that I come from a people who have been thinking about these things and honoring that work from both sides of my family. My dad being a biologist, that natural resource protector, my mom cooking for her community and being a medicine person. So from both sides of my family, I really uplift that work. I think I pull those gifts. We really in our community think about the work that we do in the world as gifts. And so some of my strengths really come from those places. I come from a community, and some of the things that my family and my community have shared with me in that generous spirit is always bring something into the spaces. Generally, when I'm present and we're in a room together rather than a virtual space, maybe I do a tea, bring some physical medicine, but I always think about when I am facilitating, presenting in any way, what medicine can I bring? Because I carry those lessons from my family with me. So I was thinking about us today, and I would like to share with you, as part of my introduction, just a quick grounding exercise. So when I was thinking about what I could bring in today, I was thinking we've been sitting for a couple of days watching these wonderful presentations. Yesterday, I got to go to Woodinville to 21 Acre Farm, but I was driving, I was sitting. And so my back is stiff. And so I just thought a grounding exercise would help me for sure. And I hope that it will help everybody in the audience. But if you would just gift me with your participation, you do not need to come off camera. This is just to kind of get us going in a good way. And I hope I can share it as a gift. And so if we can just ground our feet right where we're sitting, kind of knees above ankles, ankles above knees. If we want to straight back, open shoulders. So feet to the earth, head to the sky, right? So ground our feet, really make that connection to the earth, straighten up our back, open up our shoulders, lift our head to the sky. This is a good posture check. Sometimes we're working, out on the farm, we're working at our computer and we're sitting in ways that can make us stiff. So just grounding our feet, raising up our core, opening up our shoulders, lifting our head to the sky. We're just able to I just like to, as I'm sitting here, stretch it out a little bit, but it helps me ground myself. It's a good honor to the earth, and it's just really good for our posture because the work that we are all doing requires a great amount of care. And I hope this encourages us to start that with self-care. So thank you for allowing me to introduce myself and participate in that grounding activity. And now, if we go to the next slide, I'd like to introduce Feed 7 Generations. We are a local, tribally female-run nonprofit doing food sovereignty work in the Pacific Northwest. We primarily, because we are an Indigenous-led nonprofit, we come from that frame and lens. So a lot of our work is done in Indian country, really all over the Pacific Northwest. Our mission: Feed revitalizes the health and wellness of tribal communities by amplifying the voice of Native people, reconnecting to ancestral community health practices, and elevating land management strategies. Our vision: we envision a world in which all Native people are able to obtain a nutritionally adequate and culturally appropriate diet through a sustainable food system that honors all living things, builds community capacity, and increases the overall health of the land, water, and people. Throughout my presentation, or if we're able to collaborate or work together, you may hear me reference Feed 7 Generations, our nonprofit, as Feed. That is our acronym, but it's also an embodiment of our core principles. So within Feed, we see it as fostering economic opportunities for tribal producers in a modern global food system, educating tribal communities by developing and teaching health education materials grounded in both health traditions and modern scientific findings. Empowering tribal communities by strengthening our voice and presence in the broader food movement, and developing tribal communities through policy frameworks that create meaningful community change and measurable outcomes. So if you hear me reference us as Feed, that is our acronym, but it also really embodies our core principles. And so I want to just share some since last year. So for those of you that maybe were here last year or weren't, I wanted to kind of introduce our organization. You can learn more, feed7generations.org. Also, the resources I'll talk about today and the information, a lot of it exists there. And information about our team at Feed, our Feed team. So since last year, we are currently working on some really exciting website renovations. And so I'll introduce you to some of those today, and then I'll encourage you to go to the website if you're interested in any of them. We launched the Cedar Box experience. It's an online tool that is an experiential learning to the outside environment. We have some curriculum that we offer, and this is the online experience that teachers can use in the classroom. It brings you into the landscape of the Pacific Northwest while still being in the classroom. And it will be featured on our website. And we have launched it and have been bringing it to the schools and sharing it as much as we can to really encourage those next generation stewards. And since last year, a lot of the projects that we've been working on and talked about, we have built out as core initiatives of FEED. So we understand the sustainability of our work, really important. And a lot of what we're doing will continue because we're taking in and lifting up the voices of our community. Being consistent is really important. So having these not just be project to project, but really initiatives. So we'll take and I'll introduce you to those initiatives in just a moment, but it really is a transition for us. We're thinking it's the long game, long-term solutions. And so we're really building out those core initiatives. We are also, and we will give you a fun update, but we're also in our 3rd annual Food Sovereignty Summit this year. I remember, and so I'm just lift my hands to you guys doing today's summit. I know how much work goes into it. And so we're very excited to be on our 3rd annual, and we've had consistent growth. And then some of the kind of big fun updates, we've been really out there in the world learning and absorbing kind of climate resilience action planning that other organizations, community members, tribes, tribal orgs are doing. And so we at FEED are also developing our climate resilience action plan and policies that will build into the various project work that we do. We see ourselves as Indigenous folks as really doing climate action work, climate resilient work, but making sure that we have built out the language and that it really exists inside of all of our projects and policies is tremendously important. So those were some fun FEED updates. If you could go to the next slide. I would like to share some of those FEED initiatives. Last year, I think we shared out some of the projects, but they have grown and developed. And so one of the big initiatives that I wanted to share and projects is Native Grown and Gathered. It exists on our website. It is in its current form a digital resource guide. There is a short video. Sam, are you able to play that video? Just 2 minutes, but it's kind of the Native Grown and Gathered project intro. And so I thought we'd just share that.
Yes, let me just.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for handling the tech. I really appreciate you. I'm a little nervous, and so anything that takes something out of your hands, right, is wonderful.
Hi, my name is Roma Jean Thomas. I am a Muckleshoot tribal member and I'm the executive director for Feed 7 Generations. We are a native startup nonprofit doing food sovereignty work in the Pacific Northwest. Feed 7 Generations is talking about the next 7 generations. I hope for our community that we have health and healing and that we have a food system that represents us as people, and having a platform where other people doing food sovereignty work in Indian country can come together. This year we had our 2nd annual symposium in 2023, and this year's theme was Native Grown and Gathered because we really want it to align with the other projects we're doing. We had 120 people from all over the Northwest. We had 25 plus tribes represented. We just want to develop and grow the resource to come together as food sovereignty warriors or food sovereignty specialists, as well as a space to train up professionals in this field that are interested in doing this work and to cultivate new learning. Native Grown and Gathered is a digital resource guide and a project that was started at Feed 7 Generations to really help us map out our own food system, identify our native producers, determine what products they have, where they're located, and combining all that information onto a digital resource guide, native food to native people, really helping us keep our money in Indian country. We were able to go out and map out local tribal food producers. We purchased honey from Tulsubud Honey, that's a Puyallup tribal vendor, Salmon Woman canned salmon from Lummi Seafood Market, tea and infused oil and infused sea salt that came from Rose Island Farm. Feed 7 Generations was able to provide 200 food kits to tribal families in King County. We've been able to provide 125 preventative medicine kits like elderberry syrup in a time right now where it's cold and flu season. Native Grown and Gathered connects native food to native people.
So that was a little introduction to Native Grown and Gathered. It currently exists on our website. It is a digital resource guide. It is also a project where we were able to go out and do in-person interviews with these native producers, these farmers, going directly out onto the land, really getting to know about their business, getting to know about their products, getting to learn from their lessons, and really evaluate and document some of the needs. From that, we turned that into kind of a funding report that we've sent out to our partners, talking about native grown and gathered producers, where some of those needs are and how we might mine that gap. So I can always say as I present, if you have support mechanisms for up and coming producers, up and coming farmers, we really are working and building our connection with those Indigenous producers, those Indigenous farmers, and those that really want to cultivate those spaces. So anytime there's an idea for resources and skill sharing, we are really for that. If there are tangible resources you can think of or ways that we can bring resources out to these native producers, we would love to, because we've been able to directly evaluate right alongside them what their needs are. And so that information can not only be found on the resource guide, but we were able to make direct food purchases, put together food kits, and deliver those out. Thinking about that mindfulness and consumption and reducing waste. Some of the feedback that we've gotten, using sustainable materials, reusable materials, putting in recipes so people know how to use every ingredient. Putting in ways in which they can use the various materials that they're getting, sustainable packages for the items that were purchased, those kinds of things. So Native Grown and Gathered from the beginning until a consumer gets a product has really been mindful. It is a living initiative. At the start of Native Heritage Month, the digital resource guide that is currently on the website will have its own living webpage, which was the whole vision for it. So then you can go on and it will be more of a functional rather than a PDF or a flip book, which is currently on the webpage. But that was a way to launch and get feedback. So you can at least access the producers while the webpage is in development and will be launched really soon. And if we can stay connected, I can get that information out. Our next initiative, I think I shared in the video too, Food Sovereignty Symposium. We're in year 3. Year 1, we were digital. Year 2, we are in person. Year 3, we will stay in person. Last year's theme, Native Grown and Gathered. We were up 30% from 2022 in attendance, which was absolutely phenomenal considering we were in person. 35 plus tribes represented in the room, and a bunch of experiential learning, skill sharing. That was really phenomenal. If you could go to the next slide. And these slides are headed under Feeding the Next 7 Generations. We at Feed 7 Generations are always thinking about that. And that's kind of how we frame our work. So these feed initiatives are always with the next 7 generations in mind. Our thought is we're always bringing the knowledge before us, and we're making sure that we continue it into the next generation. Traditional feed. Because we do food distribution, because we try to do direct purchasing from our tribal producers, Native Grown and Gathered was a way to really bring that process together, help us to be good food distributors, keeping our money in our tribal economy, allowing us to uplift the tribal food economy, So we have been able to purchase from our local producers, put together food kits, again, make sure that we're able to provide the distribution, uplifting our community's ability to have the access traditional healthy foods. Again, with those recipes and those ways on how you might use those foods, really thinking about reducing the end user, any waste to the end user, and of course, reducing the economic impact. I shared a little bit at the beginning, but climate resiliency and food action, policy, planning, implementation, and really integrating Indigenous perspectives into climate initiatives and developing out our feed climate strategy and policies. Next slide, please. Of course, all of these initiatives feed the next 7 generations. Here's some photos I wanted to share. Since we're indoors today, I wanted to just brighten us up, take us outdoors, see some traditional foods. These are pictures directly from our Food Sovereignty Symposium last fall. And so outdoor food demonstrations, beautiful, healthy beverages, really highlighting our medicine. We have some nettles there, some berries and some salmon. I wanted to just share a little bit about just a visual representation of what a joy it was to really be able to be in that space. I want to make sure I have on my final slide, and again, for more information, feed7generations.org. If we can go to the last slide. One thing that we really love at Feed is generative work, going out in the community. We find ourselves, really being grounded in our traditional values and traditional food principles. That's the lens that we think about it in. But I wanted to just start with a little activity and end, if I could, with us kind of sharing. So I wanted to share from my community some traditional food principles. I'm just going to read a snippet because I know this is very small, from each of us, from each of them. And I was going to ask if we could participate in the chat. So traditional food principles, traditional food values, grounding principles that really ground the work that we do as a community. That's kind of the idea. So if while I'm sharing traditional food principles that guide our work at Feed 7 Generations in our communities, if people could be thinking about and sharing some of those grounding principles and values in your work, your community, or in your families, in your kitchens, I thought that would just be a really beautiful place to share where our commonalities come from. So I'm going to read directly from this traditional food principles. When we talk with our elders and traditional food specialists about a modern traditional foods diet might look like, what that might look like, a revitalized way of thinking emerged. Food is the center of culture. People traditionally harvest, process, prepared, and shared meals together. This unity is integral in our cultural diversity. And that's why why food is at the center of our culture. Honor the food chain, the food web. Living in harmony with nature is a native teaching. And it's something that we have had passed down through the generations and really defines the work that we do as adult professionals. Eat with the seasons. A traditional diet is a diverse diet and a diet based on seasons. The power of being in the moment and harvesting what is available ensures that a variety of foods will be on the menu. Eat a variety of foods. Our ancestors ate more complex foods and received a greater variety of vitamins and minerals in their diets. Traditional foods are whole foods. Traditional foods are real foods that have been grown in nature. They have one ingredient, themselves. Eat local foods. Plants breathe and require water. The closer they are to that source when we receive them, the better that they are going to be. And let's reduce those fossil fuels used to transport those foods by staying local. Wild and organic foods are better for health. When we eat wild and organic foods, we are supporting a healthier body and environment. Cook and eat with good intentions. Cooking is a time to honor the foods we eat. It's a time to pay respect to the life that has been given to nourish our bodies. We are connected to the food culture around us, all of us. The food we consume ties us into our place and our purpose in that place. Promote generosity. We're phenomenal folks in this room. We have so many skills to share. So promote that generosity, share those skills. And at the end of the day, cultivate food sovereignty, because we all have an inherent right to have a healthy and culturally adequate diet and access to those foods. So at the end of the day, all of the work we do is really working on those things. Okay. I'd like to try. So I'm going to share a little bit about what's in here. This is some of my favorite, is just, again, the generative learning. I like to try to eat with the seasons and eat more locally often. Eat local with the seasons and the varieties that the seasons provide. Yes, I am always told that when we're eating with the seasons, we're preparing our body either from coming out of a heavy winter, so we're eating those spring greens, or getting ready to come into a very active time of year. So we're building ourselves up with all those berries. Like right now, we're getting our antioxidants. Waste not, want not. From scratch when possible. Grow as much as we can. Absolutely. Most ethically raised meat we can afford. Absolutely. Raising your own plants and animals helps to close the loop and tie one to the land. Yes. There is no waste. Everything is a resource. Everything is a resource. Absolutely. Give it a minute for people to share. I am so thankful for your participation, for having the opportunity to just be in front of you and share a little bit about the work that we do from our communities, because I just see so much potential. I think I saw 77 folks in the room. What a powerful number of folks. There's just so much power in the work that we can do. Getting creative in the kitchen, try new things. Absolutely. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Kelsey. Yes, that was really it. That was my final activity. I really appreciate your guys' time. In my community, we raise our hands, eat local, and express gratitude for those who raise and prepare the foods. Absolutely. For our food and our nourishment. Absolutely. If you have food, thank a farmer. My mom always says that. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Roma Jean. If anyone has any questions for Roma Jean after her presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat and I'm sure she'll respond to you directly. Otherwise, feel free to hold them for our Q&A session after Tony presents. Hi, Tony.
Hi, Sam. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Ramachin, for that wonderful activity. Hello, everyone again. My name is Tony Topofia, and I proudly serve as a Food Access Network Program Manager here at Utopia, Washington. Utopia Washington's Food Access Network, we empower communities through advocacy, education, and collaboration. Our mission is to champion food sovereignty, cultural preservation, and sustainable agriculture for a healthier, more equitable future. Next slide, please. Before I go any further, I want to shed some light on our organization, Utopia Washington, for folks who haven't heard of us. Utopia stands for United Territories of Pacific Islanders Alliance of Washington. It is a queer and trans people of color-led grassroots organization born out of the struggles, challenges, strength, and resilience of the queer and trans Pacific Islander, or shortened for QTPI, community in South King County. Founded in 2009 by Taffy Maynard Johnson, who is our executive director and also a Fa'afafine. Fa'afafine is a cultural gender identity native to Samoa, translated as in the manner of a woman. Our mission is we are actively replacing systems of oppression with ecosystems of care and safety for all our communities through Black and Brown organizing, prioritizing land and bodily autonomy, and reclaiming our cultural narratives. We envision a world of abundance, autonomy, and harmony, where all forms of supremacy cease to exist for all life. Our programming is centered around care, safety, and Pacifica culture. Care through Utopia Washington Mapumea Clinic is a refuge for the Two-Spirit LGBTQIA+ community, offering quality healthcare in a space that honors all facets of their identities. The name Mapumaya is a Samoan phrase meaning come rest, reflecting our commitments to providing a gender-affirming and culturally aligned environments. We actively engage with our community to ensure members feel safe, valued, and supported. Our goal is to bridge the gap between health services and the well-being of the Two-Spirit LGBTQIA+ community through continuous community involvement and feedback. It is a free healthcare clinic providing services like primary care, gender-affirming care, sexual health, harm reduction, care work, electrolysis. Since its opening, we have been served communities with or without insurances, immigrants, regardless of their immigration status, refugees, and more. It is run by 3 volunteer doctors, our full-time nurse, and our care workers. Safety through our systems, policy, environmental, and culture change, or shortened for Speak Change. Speak Change combines civic engagement, environmental justice, and community organizing efforts to drive both individual and environmental change. The program's activities include voter registration, community education, candidates forums, legislative advocacy, social media campaigns, coalition building, immigration support, and regional organizing. And Pacifica culture through MANA, or multicultural and generational approach to navigating our ancestry. MANA represents our collective strength as a community. We harness this cultural power to amplify the voices of diasporic queer and trans-Pacific Islanders who have faced systemic oppression and cultural erasure. As cultural stewards, we aim to reclaim our narratives and bridge generational gaps through programs focused on cultural competency, language revitalization, and decolonization practices. You can learn more about Utopia Washington and our work at our website provided at utopiawa.org. Next slide, please. So at Utopia, our food access network is a key pillar of community empowerment and cultural preservation. Our diverse initiatives include supporting community farming, hosting cultural exchange events like Taste of Mana during our Manifest Week celebration in August, and prioritizing seed preservation. We offer cooking, workshops and Fatuara to Table partnerships to connect producers with community members. Our food preservation workshops and youth programs ensure sustainable food practices are passed down through generations. Collaborating with the Speak Change team, we advocate for policy reforms to ensure equitable access to land and resources for sustainable agriculture. Our educational initiatives empower community members to assert their rights to healthy, culturally relevant food. We proudly work with Indigenous communities to revitalize traditional food practices and honor ancestral knowledge. We are committed to minimizing food waste by redistributing surplus food and promoting environmentally conscious solutions. Our narrative is one of empowerment, cultural celebration, and dedication to a sustainable, just, and sovereign food future. Through Utopia's Wild Food Access Network, we build community resilience and food justice, paving the way for a brighter tomorrow for all. So that's the history of our food access network. We all know that in 2020, that's when the pandemic, the COVID-19 hit our shores. There was an increased food insecurity, and there's a lot less of less food access. So Utopia Washington started food distribution, distributing 800 food boxes weekly through delivery to our members and also other families who are in need of food. In 2021, we still continue our food distributions, and we added the food pantry to store extra food for families who walked in seeking for food assistance and food resources after the food distribution days. In 2022, we introduced the project dash delivery. So we transitioned from pick up food distribution, and now we were able to do delivery through partnership with DoorDash. We were able to deliver food boxes to families who live within 10 miles radius from our pickup location in both South King and Pierce County. Also, our food pantry transitioned to Makeki. Makeki is a Samoan word for markets. So we open from Monday to Friday, 10 to 4 for communities to come in and shop for free. And, they can take whatever they need for nourishments. And also in 2022, we were introduced to gardening at Living Wildcats Korean House. Last year, 2023, we transitioned from gardening in the Korean house to outdoor farm, and we call that Fatuanga and Horseneck. We also reopen our delivery through in partnerships with United Way King County with their Project Dash delivery. We were able to deliver food boxes within 15 miles radius from our pickup locations in both King and Pierce County. And also, we continue our makeki for families who walk in need of food resources. And also, we introduce our hot meal services every week to help with our houseless communities and families, to bring them together to enjoy our home-cooked meal. And in 2024, we did a lot of transitionings, trying to reorganize and categorize because our program grows and also our programs also grow. So we will recategorize everything under each initiatives. Like under Fatoanga, we have our Fatoanga table, seed saving and sharing, nutrition program, and indigenous food sovereignty initiatives. For Meals on Hills, we have our harm reduction outreach and starlight and moonlight outreach. For village markets, we house food distribution, market and farmers market, and food pickup and inventory from our food partners. And also our Friends Kitchen, where we house our community meal or hot meal services, Taste of Mana, and also our kitchen lunch. Next slide, please. So we've seen the food that we pick up from our amazing food partners are mostly culturally relevant to dominant community. It is so hard to find food that are culturally relevant to our Pacific Islanders community. Therefore, we plan to shift our initiative to our traditional way of life back home, and that is farming or fatuanga. Fatuanga is a native word for to the Samoan people, which means to farm. The word itself is made up with the process of farming. Fatoa means to prepare and cultivate the land. Toto means planting the seeds or transplanting until the land is covered with crops, hence the name Fatoanga. Our approach, Utopia Was Fatoanga initiative promotes sustainable agriculture through a community-focused model. Inspired by the Samoan concept of Fatoanga, it encourages collective responsibility and support. Community members collaborate to cultivate land, share resources, and enhance food sovereignty. This initiative highlights the importance of land cultivation, knowledge exchange, and mutual aid, aiming to create resilience and empower communities through agriculture. Next slide, please. Here are some of the crops that we were able to grow at our Fatoanga that our people, our PI, Pacific Islanders people love to cook. In collaboration with the Living Wildcats, Utopia was able to receive a 1/4 acre of farmland at Horse Neck in 2023. We were able to harvest a lot of produce last year, as you've seen in the photos in the slide. We are not a certified organic farm yet, but all our efforts putting into our Fatoanga are mostly organic farming techniques, as we have learned from our traditional way of farming and also from Bobby's bi-weekly workshop and trainings. We want to give our gratitude to King County and Cedar Grove for providing compost that we use in our farm. If you look at the photos, there is some of our harvest we had from last year. The size of the eggplants almost the size of the pumpkins and squash. They also grew in heart shapes. Also, the African spinach or chards couldn't fit in a regular shopping bag. So we use rolls of trash bags to feed them. See, if you can look at that community holding a bag of chards, you can tell they're from those leaves. They're so big. um, these are the results of um, our work. So we're trying to do organic farm last year. We had never used any chemicals nor plastic on our farm, so we only control the weed by weeding bi-weekly, watering, and using compost from Cedar Grove. The highlights of last year's harvest was our watermelons. If you see on the top right corner, you see those local farmers enjoying our watermelons. The story behind it was none of the farmers at Horse Neck were able to grow watermelon. They had tried before and none were able to harvest any fruits until they saw our watermelon bore fruits. Anytime I visit our farm during harvest, one of the elderly couples who also farm at Horse Neck would approach me and ask for a watermelon. They say the husband never stops talking about our watermelons. To him, the taste reminded him of his home where he grew up from, and he had never tasted a sweet organic watermelon since he moved here in the United States until now. This is one of the main reasons we love to do organic farming is to bring the diverse communities together and hear about their heartfelt stories. Next slide, please. So we not only reconnect to the land by doing farming, but it is through Fatoanga we were able to access to a lot of resources, strengthening relationships with our partner, living weekends by giving back through volunteering at the greenhouse, meeting and making new connections with local farmers and other amazing organizations, connecting to farm workshops and trainings by Poppy, connecting to King County, connected to Cedar Grove, and learn more about the process of composting at their Maple Valley facility. We're also connecting to Native organizations like Unkitawa here in Cairns, who provided us with cases of seeds. We also connecting to Utopia Portland, and they had transported and provided us with taro. I will mention that in our next slide. Bringing the diverse communities together by distributing free produce from our harvest through our pop-up produce markets, and also through Fatoanga, we're able to add organic produce into our community feast, and also bringing communities together to not only enjoying home-cooked meal from us, but a great opportunity to share and learn more from each other. Next slide, please. So this year, highlights for our Fatoanga is our Kalo. So it's taro. Those how our Pacific Islanders communities call taro in their native language. That's taro or kalo or talo. Taro is incredibly popular among Pacific Islanders for several reasons. Taro holds a special place in the traditions and cultures of many Pacific Island communities. It's often featured in creation stories and is considered a symbol of respect and connectedness to the land. In some cultures, taro is treated almost like a family member, with specific varieties linked to ancestral stories. Taro is packed with essential nutrients, including dietary fiber, vitamins like E, C, and B6, and minerals such as magnesium and iron. It is, a, it is also low on glycemic index, making it a healthy option for managing blood sugar levels. Taro can be prepared in numerous ways, from traditional traditional dishes like poi, a Hawaiian staple made by smashing cooked taro, to modern recipes like taro chips and smoothies. Its leaves and roots are used in various dishes across the Pacific Islands. So the leaves, we use the leaves, we put coconut milk inside the leaves and we bake them. And we call that palusami, which is one of the most common delicacy in the Pacific Islands. The roots we boil with coconut milk or bake in the oven. Taro cultivation is integral to the social fabric of Pacific Island communities. It represents endurance and resilience with its farming practices often passed down through generations. These factors make taro not just a food source, but a cornerstone of Pacific Islander identity and community life. So in May, we reached out, we heard and seen that our sister organization in Portland, called Utopia Portland, were successfully grew the taro for more than 10 years. So we reached out if there's a way that we can get some taro from them so we can do some experiments to see if the taro can grow here since our Pacific Islanders communities, this is their staple food back home. So in May, 7 members from Utopia Portland, they came up and they brought the taro, the baby taros with them. So we planted them at our farm, and after 3 weeks, as you see in the middle photo, that's how it looks after 3 weeks. They're still tiny. And after 14 weeks, that's how our taro now looks. So it is now ready for the leaves to be harvested to make palusami and lupulu and all that kind of cooking. But we are trying to experiment of how long that we can grow this taro in order for us to harvest the roots. Since the roots is very common and people love to eat the taro roots instead of rice. Um, yes. Next slide, please. So yes, thanks to collaborative efforts with our partners, the Utopia Wild Food Access Network has experienced significant growth. Together, we've expanded our reach, enhanced community empowerment, and fostered sustainable food practices. With our development director Carmen saying, our Food Access Network is the least funded program here in Utopia, Washington, but the most resourceful when it comes to food resources. And this is the reason why it's through collaboration with our amazing partners. Next slide. Oh, okay, and that's it from me. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Tony. That was really insightful. Now I think it's time for some Q&A. I'm gonna stop sharing screen in case anyone wants to raise their hand and ask Tony or Rowan Jean any questions, or feel free to drop them in the chat as well. Oh,
I'm trying
Heather.
to raise my hand. Can I
Sorry.
find the thing? Can I just go ahead? Thank you both. Those were both very interesting presentations, and I had missed last year, so I didn't know about your programs or very much. So Roman, on your work, I'm wondering, because I remember years ago, one of the things we were talking about with riparian buffers for farms along creeks or rivers, that one of the potential solutions was to create harvestable buffers as opposed to, and so because the farmers don't want to have to do a big wide buffer because it's taking up their land and it also might shade part of their land, but the rivers need a buffer so that the farm activities, including pesticides, aren't impacting the river. So there was this idea that was floated, and this is like 10 or more years ago, to create riparian buffers that were basically harvestable buffers for kind of exactly what you were talking about. So I wondered if you'd had any connection with that. And Tony, my question for you, by the way, you like totally brightened my day. But anyway, what amount of land would be like the ideal amount of land at this time? I know you might grow later, but like right now, what would be the ideal amount of sort of acreage? So those are my two questions. Thank you.
I can jump in there. Thank you. I'm going to reach out to my dad, Jeff Thomas, with that exact question, with my colleague, Val Segrist, and with our council member that Louis Ungaro, who talks kind of environmental, as well as forestry questions. That is a beautiful question. It goes right to the heart of our work, and also the heart of where we're at, right? We're at the base of Mount Rainier, and a lot of what we do there kind of in the Enumclaw Plateau. Of course, our tribes across Washington, but I'm going to bring that question forward. I would love to connect for a variety of reasons to Zero Waste Washington. But I am going to have that conversation and find out in my tribal networks because that is very interesting. And we have been given some land and done a few projects around Elderberry, doing some kind of and I think it is a buffer area, right? It's land that the tribe bordering several farms. So yes, I think we are involved in projects, maybe not using that language, but I'm also going to check with my networks because that's really exciting and I love it. But elderberries has been kind of back and forth on how effective it is. So we'll see. Thank you.
And there could be funding that could come with that. That's another issue. So let's connect later.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Heather. That was a wonderful question. As of right now, we are working together with King County and also Washington Farmland Trust to put out our ad to see if there are any farmland owners who wants to give out some lease land or also own land so that we can continue our farming. So right now we are looking at 2 to 4 acres of land. Since we are trying to look for land first before we move forward to do greenhouse, since most of the crops that we are trying to look around in Washington are tropical plants like the taro. They really don't grow well through the winter. So that's why we are trying to look for land and also the greenhouse that can do temperature control so that we able to grow and produce food that are culturally relevant to our Pacific Islanders.
Okay, great. So if you aren't already, want to definitely connect you to the King, and you may already be connected to the King County Food Systems program, because that could be both greenhouses and acreage. That could be listed in a plan, so we could get you money for that too.
Thank you, Heather.
Kelsey.
Yeah, well, first off, I personally just want to thank you both for being here and kicking off our day. It was, as Heather said, you both brightened our days already, and I think it was such a great way to start off our conversations today. Tony, I had some questions for you in terms of the different meal options between like the delivery, the market, and the hot meal service. You said that the deliveries are like 10 to 15 miles from pickup areas. So is that in terms of, is the pickup primarily at Utopia's main office? Is there a couple options for community members to go across different geographical areas? I'm just trying to like visualize where this service is being provided regionally.
Thank you, Kelsey, for that. So in our slide, you see that in this year, we didn't mention any delivery. The reason why, because now our youth programs, our youth coordinators have now been placed into schools, and there's a lot of food requests from our kids at school. Since our team is so small and we have a lot of programs to run, so we are putting a hold on our delivery, but we are still there are still communities who are reaching out for food, and we are still open that to come and get food from us. Or the best option is to find where they live, and we will connect them with our other food partners, so that way they can serve them while they are closer to them. Also, we have our sister organization, Pacific Islander Community Association in Federal Way. That's where we refer some of our communities, since they are still doing the project dash delivery.
Thank you for clarifying. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Do we have any more questions? Okay, great. Well, if anyone has further questions later, I think Roma Jean and Tony will stay on the line for a little bit, so feel free to message them directly. We'll also share we'll also show all of our presenters' slides afterwards, and all of them have their contact information, so feel free to reach out to them directly as well after. In the meantime, we have a 10-minute break. It's 10:01 right now, so if everyone could come back around 10:11, that'd be great. But until then, feel free to use the bathroom, get some more coffee, grab a snack, and I will see you in 10 minutes. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone had a nice break. As others return, we can move on to part 2 of our day and our presenters. Heather, I see Heather. Heather Trim from Zero Waste Washington will be our first presenter of part 2. Take it away, Heather.
Okay, great. And I'm going to turn off my video since my internet is a little bit wonky today. Okay, hey, good morning, everyone. I'm going to be presenting on legislative work related to organics. And if you could go to the next slide, please. Actually, I should first say, for those of you who are not familiar with Zero Waste Washington, so we are a statewide 501c3 that work to get trash out of the landfill. And so we do this through 3 ways: helping get laws passed at the state level and the city and county level, sometimes the federal level. We do research projects, and we do community-based pilot projects. All right, so today I'm going to do one slide on the lead up, but then we're going to talk about the organics bills that have passed and then looking forward. Next slide. So this is a recap for some of you, but for those of you who are a little bit newer to the issue, I'm going to go very quickly through kind of the history of the recent bills since 2019 on organics. So the first bill in this sort of suite of bills was Rep. Beth Dolio's bill back in 2019 that was addressing food waste by setting a goal to reduce Washington's generation of food waste by 50% by 2030 relative to 2015. And it also, very importantly, required ecology to develop a plan how to do that. This goal matched the Obama administration's goal that they had set on a national level, and also some other sort of regional goals. Next slide. Then that same year, there was a sleeper bill that went through, which was led by Rep. Bill Ramos, and that was about labeling compostable products because of the confusion. So a bag such as this would be illegal. The idea here is that this is confusing to the public. They see a green bag, they think, oh, it's green, it must be, it must be eco. And it says recyclable, and most importantly, it says biodegradable. And the problem is this confuses the public. So the law basically says, and it's been improved through the other 2 organics bills over time, is that you cannot use terms like biodegradable or oxy-degradable and things like that. It has to say compostable if it is compostable, and it has to meet the standards for that, the lab standards for that. Next slide. Then in that time frame, we did some research interviewing many experts in Washington State, and that we have a lot of experts on this topic, to look at how can we improve organics management in Washington State. Next slide. And that was published in May of 2021, and it had 37 policy recommendations, which we have been working with partners. So none of this would happen without a lot of you. Some of you on this call have been very directly related, and others less so, but we can't do this unless we have partnerships. Next slide. And I'm not going to read all that. You can look at the slide later. And then one of the big things is that California passed 1383 back in September of 2016. It's a climate related bill, and for their state, they had a goal to reduce organic waste disposal, if you look in the box on the far right, that by 75% by 2025, and edible food recovery 20% by 2022. This got a little bit derailed by COVID and the pandemic, and so they have actually extended things a bit because the local jurisdictions really struggled to be able to do this. And the other issue they have is that they really needed quite a few new organics, like composting facilities and anaerobic digestion facilities and things like that, that we don't need quite as many of. We need some, but we don't need the huge number that they need there. This also addressed hydrofluorocarbon gases and anthropogenic black carbon. And we've done at least some of that in other bills in Washington. Next slide. To get ready for the 2022 legislative session, we were able to raise money, and also some of the partners were able to contribute to pay for a series of stakeholder meetings over the summer. And right now we're doing another set of those similar stakeholder meetings this summer. So this summer, a little bit more focused on negotiation, but that summer was focused on sort of going through the topics and looking at what we could do. Next slide. And in 2022, Ecology did publish that plan that had been required by Beth Dolio's bill before, back in 2019. And this has 30 recommendations. And so the efforts in the recent organics bills have been to implement these recommendations as well, including, I'll mention later, about moving into 2025. Next slide. So in 2022, Rep. Fitzgibbon led the bill that passed, and Senator Monadas assisted in the Senate to reduce organic. The goal is to reduce organic material going to the landfill. Next slide. I'm not going to go into all the detail because I think you're hearing about that through other means. I'd be happy to, if anyone wants me to come and give a presentation to your agency or organization, give you a lot more details about these, but I'm going to go very quickly today. The big thing this bill did is it established a statewide goal similar to that California bill of reducing organic material going to the landfill by 75% by 2030 relative to 2015 levels, and at least 20% of our edible food that was disposed of at the 2015 level to be recovered for human consumption by 2025. Next slide. And it established the Washington Center for Sustainable Food Management, which you'll hear about from Jade. And in general, a lot of other features, which I'm not going to go into. Basically, the idea was to get the ball rolling and to also provide certainty so that businesses could expand here in Washington, could get bank loans and things like that. Next slide. Then in 23, Rep. Wallen led a bill to set up a task force to address compostable products. That had seats that were named in the legislation. That was a task force that has now been meeting for about a year and a half, and their report from that task force is going to be coming out in about a month. Next slide. And then lastly, last year, or early, sorry, last year, it's not last year yet. Earlier this year, Rep. Beth Dolio in the House and then assisted by Senator Lovick in the Senate led the charge on HB 2301, which implemented or put into play more components related to the organic system. And if you can go to the next slide. The key things were requiring single-family residential source separation by 2030 in the urbanized areas of our state. Next slide. And setting up grants for doing pilot projects and supporting food hubs and cold transportation, that's like for refrigerated or frozen transportation, and food donation pilots, and setting up a stakeholder, so the 4 grants, and then also setting up a stakeholder committee, which now has kicked off about a month ago to look at how can we improve food donation and really get that edible food to the hungry people who need it. Next slide. And then lastly, another big thing from that, that most recent law is to also set up a grant program for providing support to local governments, NGOs, and businesses to implement both 1799, which was Rep. Fitzgibbon's bill, and then the most recent bill. Next slide. And here is when the governor signed that bill in March, just earlier this year. Okay, next slide. So that was all the lead up to what are we working on now. And this is a photo from earlier this year in January, about the second week of January, where I really thought that the fountain that's not necessarily that attractive normally was quite attractive when it was frozen. It was cold. I don't know if you guys remember back then. Next slide. So we are, like I mentioned before, we are doing a series of stakeholder meetings that are very much more focused on actual language, and Rep. Dolio is going to be negotiating on this bill language before legislative session begins in January. And if anyone on this Zoom is not already part of that stakeholder process and would like to be receiving the emails to that, please email me or Sam, who is moderating this session. She is also part of the team that is doing the facilitation for those. So you can either email me or her, and we can get you on that list. So we already had one meeting. We've had 2 meetings. The second meeting was the first meaty meeting, as it were, and that meeting looked. Oh, there you go. Thanks, Sam. That meeting looked at residual pesticides and carbon sequestration project initiatives. I'm not going to go over everything on this slide because I'm about to talk about each of these items briefly in the next slides. But this gives you the layout of the meetings, and then the last meeting in December and the January meeting, those topics are to be determined. Those may be more focused on negotiation. This will sort of, we were leaving room for flexibility there. Next slide. Okay, so starting with the residual pesticide issue. This was in the bill that passed earlier this year, but this was taken out. And the issue is that we have residual pesticides, particularly pesticides that are used on hay, that when they get into the compost system, the commercial compost system, or actually, I guess your home composting as well, the pesticides don't break down, and they can go through to, then when you apply that compost, they can stunt plants. So here's an example. I think it's a tomato in this case, but it can stunt various plants that you're trying to grow. And so there's been efforts to sort of tone this down. We're not talking about an all-out ban on these chemicals, but a ban on having them be used as feedstock. And the issue that we're trying to work out on this right now is how to do it in a way that does not involve more of a complaint-based approach as opposed to a bunch of inspectors. So this is not trying to set up some new big, restriction in terms of people power. Okay, next slide. Then the next topic that was already discussed on August 21st, and we are accepting comments. So if you talk to Sam, you can get a copy of the actual wording for this, because this will be feeding into what a Rep. Dolio will then be using when she starts to work on the language negotiation specifically. So Anthony, and I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. I just call him Anthony. But anyway, it's either Myant or Myant. was a presenter, and he is head of Zero Foodprint. He used to be a chef, so he's very, very sort of tied into the restaurant hospitality business. And he's also very interested in regenerative agriculture. And so the idea of what Zero Foodprint has been doing, and it doesn't have to be zero, the way the legislation is written, it wouldn't necessarily have to be Zero Foodprint who does it, but it would set up the ability for restaurants to optionally charge their, put on their receipt a 1% or $1 or something like that for your order. 1% being very, pretty small. Like if you look at the Subway receipt on the right, so it's 11 cents. And this is the Colorado version. So this is a Subway in Colorado that's already doing this. That would then be able to go into, if you go to the next slide, a state fund that we already have in place. So this is an example from, I think, California. But the idea is we have an existing farm and fields program, and this could go into that or our existing compost purchasing program for farmers, so that we can fund not only compost but also regenerative agriculture. But we obviously are coming out from the idea of compost. And the reason I wanted to show this slide is if you look closely at the columns there, you can see that most of what the farmers are applying for through that program in California, that you can see compost. So a lot of them are applying for compost. So this has been a pretty successful example from that previous work. Okay, next slide. Okay, moving forward to the future meetings, this is going to be a topic next week, is operator training. So what we've heard from the experts is that we need to move the compost industry more into the mode that and anaerobic digestion, by the way, more similar to, for example, wastewater treatment facilities, and for that matter, real estate professionals, lawyers, et cetera, who do annual sort of refreshers on their training, and they have required credits they have to get every year. So this is a slide showing the work, which is our Washington, I'm not going to say the right words, but anyway, organic something. Anyway, it's our statewide organics group. And many of you are on here, so you're probably mad at me for not saying it correctly. They are sponsoring a current, thank you. Thank you, Cal. There we go. I kind of thought those were the words, but I wasn't entirely sure. Training that is a very, very high quality training that is over 4 days and really gets into the science, the technology, et cetera, on how to really create a high quality compost and product. Next slide. So we had, I should say, we had that language in the, you see all the people who are part of Worker now chiming in to correct me. We had that in last year's bill, but we took it out because of funding and the fiscal note, but we are hoping to bring that back this year because it is a really an important need that we have for the state. Then the second topic for the next meeting is looking at 2 of the recommendations from the Use Food Well plan from Ecology. And Ecology did quite a stakeholder meeting to develop these. So this is not just sort of, limited input in terms of how these were developed. So recommendation 20 and 21 are about doing a much better job of mapping the food waste and the sort of needs that people have for excuse me, getting this edible food and the stuff going to compost and anaerobic digestion sort of figured out in our state. Next slide. The next meeting will be looking at school food waste. So these are recommendations from the Use Food Well plan 10, 11, 12, 13, 17, and 26. And they are basically, I'm not going to read each one, but these are basically about improving infrastructure and education programs for use in schools and trying to reduce the food that is wasted and increase the food that can be then reused, feeding into like, shared tables and things like that. So both related to food banks, but also within the school itself. I was on a webinar a few weeks ago and was very impressed that the school was taking the food left over one day and then the next, day or so creating delicious things the kids liked. In for example, apple pie, an apple cobbler, that kind of thing. So, not letting this stuff go to waste. Okay, next slide. And then and I don't remember the dates now, but then another day we'll be looking at C&D, creating a C&D waste study. So this is not going to be regulatory things at this time, but construction and demolition waste, which is what C&D is a very large area that we have not really, well, it's been tackled some, but across the US, it's only been partially tackled, and it's, according to EPA, 31% of the load that's going to the landfill right now. So a very, very large amount that we need to really dig into and come up with some good ideas of what we can do to both regulate, but also maybe voluntary things as well. Okay, next slide. And then offal, if you don't know what that is, it's the, and I'm not going to get the definition exactly right here, but it's the animal parts that can't be used. You don't use it, like, for example, the part of the cow that is not the part that we are eating as humans, and or animals, they can make into animal feed. So this is really material that needs to either be composted or it can be rendered. And we don't have very many facilities in Washington that are handling this. And so how do we deal with offal? Because we have farmers have animals that die on occasion, or you have like an avian flu type of thing. So you have some mass die-offs, and we need to be able to handle this in a way that is not sending it to the landfill. Next slide. Then a very touchy subject is load rejection. And I know some of you are here from some facilities and you're going to be screaming right now. This is the challenge we have is we have, especially from commercial loads, but also from, I love it, awful, not so awful feedstock. Love that. We have material that's going to the compost facilities that absolutely should not be going. And we don't really have a level playing field at this point on terms of rejecting those loads. So figuring out a way to strengthen the ability to have load rejection so that we can really push things back upstream a bit to ensure that we really have cleaner feedstock coming into our facilities. Next slide. And then a topic we had in last year's bill had a lot of discussion. We didn't quite get it there. We didn't nail it last year, is getting standardized bin colors for the purposes of reducing confusion for the consumers or the residents and the people who work at the businesses. And there's been a number of studies that have shown that this is a very important thing to do, but it's hard because we have a number of waste providers who are using different colors, not the 3 standard colors. And we did make it green or brown for organics in the last year's bill. So this is a big topic that is going to require some serious discussion. Okay, next slide. And then we now really need to do a stronger program on education and including social marketing. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with social marketing. There is a training coming up in King County for free. Email me. I just put out the announcement this morning, so it's going to be filling up quite quickly to learn about how that works. And then on the left is an example from Vancouver, up north, BC, on some of the cool ads that they've done. And I'm not sure they've done it necessarily as part of social marketing, but we really need to get more people to do composting and then to do it in a way that does not create contamination. And this is like one of the key areas that whenever I'm talking to people about this, they're like, well, we got to have better education. And in my mind, it's got to be, we've really got to include social marketing as part of that. Okay, now, and then I should just explain the graph on the right. There's a segment of the population on any given issue who really, if you just tell them what to do, they will do it. So if you have a sign, they'll look at the sign and they will put the thing that you want them to, in this case, they'll put the right things in the right bin. Then there's a large segment of the population who might need it to be a little easier for them, either through, well, through various means. I won't go into the detail there. And then there's the last small group who basically need to be required to do it. And so this is when you're working on social marketing, you're really working on that red area here, the folks who need to make it easier for them. Okay, next slide. And then another big topic is permitting, siting, and air quality. We've done a little bit related to this in the two previous bills, but this will be kind of a little bit more of an intense piece this year. Next slide. Of facilities that manage organic materials. And then last year the bill 2301 does include single family source separation by January 1, 2030, but multifamily was taken out near the end of the legislative session. And this is a critical area. We need consistency across everyone's experience, and we want that material to not be going to the landfill. So this will be a big discussion in the fall. Next slide. And then enforcement, and I actually am not 100% sure of the folks that said they want to talk about enforcement, which element of enforcement they wanted to include in the bill, but I will find out. And so I don't really have a lot to say about this topic right now. Next slide. And then compostable products. So we are not there yet. We have Bill Ramos's bill law that passed, back in 2019. There have been improvements to that through both 1799 and 2301, but we really are not there yet, and it really is a challenging issue, kind of all around. And there is a national effort going on right now. There's going to be a meeting in Denver in September. And if you're interested in that, let me know, because there are some seats available for that if you're interested in going. I'm hopeful that will create some good recommendations for policy work on this topic. And we do have the 1033 process that is just finishing up as well. Okay, next slide. And then date label standardization. So this is going to be the second real go at it. Rep Dolio had a bill on this that I didn't put on the bills that didn't pass several years ago, and then it's been talked about a little bit with the recent bills, but it's not made it through. So the issue is that from the various studies that have been done, the number one waste of food in people's homes is the confusion when they see these different types of wording on the products. And many people, including some of my family members, they see the date and they think, oh, it's expired, I must get rid of it, when in fact it's really about the quality of the item, not that it's actually expired. So the idea is to have standardized language. And next slide, just yesterday, I got this email last night. California has a bill that is on the way to the governor. So it passed both houses there yesterday, which is California AB 660. And this is modifying one of their existing statutes, and I put in blue the new language, which is that Cal Recycle, which is in this case the department here. So they have an agency that does recycling and similar things. Must, if you look at the bottom, include they need to adopt requirements to help meet that goal of less than 20% edible food that is currently disposed of. So in other words, recover edible food. And the requirements shall include, but not be limited to, product labeling requirements that reduce food waste. So rather than putting the language in statute, in their case, they are having the agency go through like probably rulemaking essentially to develop it. But this is putting California on that path if the governor signs this. And that is great for us, because I think that gives us a lot of legs for ourselves for this bill in January. Okay, next slide. And that's it for now. And you can always reach out to me with questions and comments later as well.
Thank you, Heather. If anyone has questions for Heather, feel free to drop it in the chat. I know she'll be around for a little longer. Heather, would you be able to share that link to the training you were talking about in the chat as well?
I can't. It's too long. So if they're interested in the social marketing training, just email me and I'll put my email in the chat.
All right, great. Next we have Philip and Winnie from Renewal Food Bank.
Hello, can you see and hear us?
Yes, I hear you, Philip. I know Winnie was having some issues.
Hear me?
Yep.
And then I don't know my video is working or not.
Doesn't
Is-
look like it's working.
Yeah, but I'm glad that at least you can hear me. I will see if I can figure that out.
Great. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks for your time, everyone. It's great to meet you. My name is Philip Peters. I'm the Executive Director at Renewal Food Bank.
Hi, I'm Winnie Ao. I'm the Development and PR Manager.
So if you want to go to the next slide, you can see where Renewal is located. We are in the Crossroads neighborhood in Bellevue, located inside of the Highland Covenant Church. We're an independent 501c3, but we're really honored to rent space from our wonderful partners at Highland. And if you know the Bellevue area, we're right across the street from Highland Middle School. Next slide, please. This is a look at some of the beautiful faces of the customers that we're really proud to serve every single week. We've been seeing enormous growth. I've been with Renewal for about 2 years. When I started on a really busy week, we'd serve about 280 families. Now a busy week serves around 475, upward of 500 families in a single week. And when we serve 500 families, that's equivalent to about 1,500 individuals served, as in the members of that household. Next slide. I think it's next slide again, actually. Thank you.
So we provide shelf-stable items such as rice and pasta, canned food, bread and pastry, as well as frozen items to our customers. Because of the effort of our staff and volunteer, we are able to provide at least two portions of protein and 8 to 10 different types of fresh produce to our customer weekly to empower them to eat healthy. Next slide, please. So we also provide baby food, diapers, hygiene items, and pet food to our customers. Each family could take home about $150 to $200 worth of groceries every week, providing significant relief for their monthly budget while avoiding the devastating decision between the basic needs such as paying rent, having education, or getting food. Next. So you can see here, this is the item that we provide to our customers. Okay, next, please.
Yes, as you saw there's a lot of variety from produce to deli items to meat protein items. It's really fun being able to supply high quality and culturally relevant food. And when you're thinking about where that food comes from, well, to start, something that I'm sure a lot of people in this virtual room are familiar with. Unfortunately, in our state, in our country, so much of our perfectly edible, wonderful food goes to the landfill. And we find that just to be such an unfortunate situation. And we're really, really dedicated to solving that through food rescue. And so as you can see here, more than 1 million tons of food waste annually in Washington state. This just seems so high for us. It makes us so unhappy to hear those numbers, seeing upward of 35% of edible food going to the landfill. We just find that unacceptable. So we're working our best to prevent that. Next slide, please. So one of the main ways we do that is through our food rescue program. So our driver, our full-time employee, is going out into the community about 25 trips in this beautiful cargo van you see here every single week to about 18 or 19 different partners in order to bring home perfectly edible food, to bring it out and provide it to our customers. The next slide will show you a little bit about some of those partners that range from our groceries as well as restaurants. So we're really lucky to have a partnership with Molly Moon Ice Cream, where when they're turning over their seasonals, we get a chance to get those seasonals that are on the way out and provide those to our families. And then, like we talked about, looking for those higher quality and culturally relevant partners. So yes, we want to partner with Safeway and Target and QFC, but we also work with Town and Country, PCC, Asian Family Market, Amazon Fresh, Amazon Go, so that we're able to bring in things that range from beautiful meat that everyone eats, and then meat that meets dietary restrictions and cultural and religious needs. So we can have pork and beef, we can have lamb and fish, we can have halal and vegan. So we're really trying to make sure we cover everyone as much as possible. In the next slide, you'll see some more of those partnerships, like we mentioned, Asian Family Market, and also Tutabella, the great restaurant that does a lot of wonderful pre-made items. The pre-made items, when it think of an entree, a sandwich, or a salad, those can be really useful for all families, but especially the case for families that have unhoused members that don't have access to kitchen facilities. Next slide, please.
So we see a huge growth and demand, and our drivers do not have the capacity to do more pickup. Therefore, we encourage our volunteers to do small, slow pickup for us with their own vehicle. Can you imagine providing nearly 500 loaves of bread for all the family we serve every week? It is a huge amount, and the usual donation from, let's say, QFC, Safeway, Target, Town and Country are not really enough to keep up the demand. So that's why, yeah, please go to the next slide. That's why we build our relationship with the local store and have volunteers to pick up the pastry and bread from the French bakery and Panera. And also we have volunteers to pick up meat from a local butcher shop, as well as the halal meat market. Next, please.
One of the most innovative partners that we have is a relatively new nonprofit called Eat Happy Now that is able to bring in tremendous amounts of food from all sorts of different sources. So their founder and CEO, Sharmila, pictured here, came up with a brilliant and simple idea. There's food that needs to be taken to places that can put it out to the families, and those places need food. So she's connected A to B by using volunteers. So volunteers will show up at a place. For example, if you look at the next slide, you'll see some of the partners. Maybe they'll show up at a Crumble Cookie and they'll pick up boxes of cookies and they'll bring them to Renewal Food Bank. We'll bag them up and we'll put them out for the community. She's also going to Mary, the Indian grocery store, so she can rescue culturally relevant produce. So we'll bring in some wonderful eggplant or bok choy or other great things that we need. And then also making sure that we're getting the variety and quality of meat, whether that be high quality meat like steaks instead of just ground beef, or culturally relevant meat like lamb, fish, and others. Next slide, please.
We actively engage with the community. We recently partnered with the 21 Acres to pick up excess farm product from them every week. We also inspire faith-based groups to grow and then donate extra fresh produce to us. Next, please.
Every week when I come down the ramp with my bags of vegetables and herbs, you know, things smell good, they smell fresh, and the looks on people's faces and how excited people are with just lettuce and cucumbers and zucchini and tomatoes, you know, it's just exciting to see that it's having an impact on people.
Next slide, please. So now Bellevue Botanical Garden is encouraging their members to donate fresh produce to us instead of letting the amazing fruits and veggie rot in their garden. All this partnership with the community will bring everyone closer and then help people be aware of food waste and also the hunger issue.
So as you might imagine, food rescue is wonderful and we really, really love it, but it does leave small amounts of gaps. You can't quite get 100% of what you need from food rescue because you're not ordering it. You don't create an invoice, you can't target specific items. So on a given week, we might see that we're a little bit low on one or two of our many, many shelves. And so we partner with our community to do food and hygiene drives to meet those needs. And hygiene can be actually the trickiest of all because hygiene doesn't tend to expire in the same way. So you don't get as much of that from your typical grocery partners. But thankfully, we've partnered with, as you can see in the bottom left corner here, a young man doing his Eagle Scout project for Boy Scouts was able to bring thousands of pounds of food and hygiene to us. And it was really no effort on our behalf. He went out and did all the work himself and brought in much, much needed resources. And we do the examples of this all the time with faith-based groups, with businesses, with families, with friends. It's a really exciting way to meet the need. And if you bring up the next slide, you'll also see that we did a big partnership. You've probably all heard of Stamp Out Hunger, which happens every spring with USPS The post office puts out those famous blue bags for everyone to put items out with their mail. And then the mail carriers bring those items back to the local regional mail location. And then we pick all of them up, bring them back to renewal. And we were able to rescue almost 8,000 pounds of food that was probably going to either go and sit in a cabinet until it expired, or sometimes people did go out and purchase things as well. So it's kind of a hybrid model of rescue and donation. Next slide, please. All of this together from all these different plans, from the grocery stores to the restaurants to partnerships and getting creative with volunteers as well as staff. In the last 6 months, we've rescued about 350,000 pounds of food from going to the landfill. Obviously, we're a food bank. Our primary goal is to feed people, but we're really proud that our secondary goal is to look out for all that food and make sure it goes to good use, especially in terms of honoring the farmers, ranchers, and producers that work so hard to make the food, and then to protect the environment by not letting all that food go to the landfill, causing all the negative externalities that we all know about. Next slide, please.
So now you might wonder how we did it. To be honest, food rescue is hard. There are many more steps you have to go through when comparing to just clicking several buttons to place an order and waiting for your delivery. So first of all, you have to build a relationship. We always say that don't be shy. And I remember walking into Molly Moon in Redmond, walking into the store of like the Golden Steel Meat Market and then the PetSmart randomly and talk to their manager about our needs. It turned out that they see our passion of food rescue and then our passion for helping others, and they love it and that they're really happy to be the part of it. When building the relationship, also be considerate. Try to accommodate the need of your potential partner and avoid adding too much extra workload for them. Make them feel like, oh yeah, food rescue from their side is easy. And after you build your relationship, you will need to maintain it. Try to be like a consistent, but be flexible. Our driver never miss a pickup. If he or other volunteer somehow not available for some reason, we are the one who drive the van or like drive our own vehicle to pick up the groceries. Missing a pickup can cause inconvenience to the store, and they will need to find alternative to deal with the donation. And if this happens over and over, and it will definitely discourage them from continuing the partnership. And I still remember the donation manager from Tutabella once told us that they love to partner with us because we are flexible and we respond to their emails quickly. Also, don't forget to show your appreciation. You can thank your partners through social media and newsletter. Invite them to come to your facility and give them a tour so they can see the impact that they have done. Also, remember to thank the store workers with a big smile as they work hard to make sure that the food rescue happen. Next slide, please. And then for transporting the food is also, it would be great to maintain an extensive volunteer base to help facilitate the food pickup. And then last but not least is our cleaning. So I would say cleaning is the most time consuming part and not everyone like to do it. Providing a clear cleaning guideline would help. And then also, we strongly recommend that you clean with your volunteer because that shows them your value and makes them feel that you are with them instead of just assigning a less desirable work to them. You can also make the volunteer experience more fun and meaningful to help retain your volunteers. Next slide, please. So last Thanksgiving, many of our customers wrote thank you notes to our volunteer filled with many heartfelt stories. This definitely encouraged our volunteer to continue volunteering with us and to think of as many ways as possible to help our local community. On the top left corner, you can see is like some of our volunteers decide to donate the books to kids during the Christmas time, and then like she wrap them as a gift to the kids. And then also we provide a computer for our customer as well. Next slide, please. So now we're further minimizing our organic waste by inspiring people to pick up the food compost after our cleaning process to feed their animals. Next. Next slide, please. And then we recently received a donation of our countertop compost machines. We're hoping to start making our own compost and give it out to any community member who love gardening. We hope that this will encourage them to grow more produce, and then they could donate the excess food to us so we can provide more high quality fresh fruits and veggie to our customers. Next slide, please.
And we are so determined to avoid food waste that when renewal comes to the end of our week, we're open on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. On Wednesday afternoon, we redonate any remaining items to other nonprofits so that food can still go to use rather than go to the landfill. We're really proud to partner with organizations like the Salvation Army, particularly where they're working with King County in affordable housing in Redmond, right across the street from us, where we can support some new affordable housing with very valuable produce, maybe some salad kits or deli items that are very useful for the community, and make sure those go to families instead of going to the landfill. We'll go to the next slide. And this is our last slide. This is our team. This is our whole staff. We're a very small team, just the 5 of us. And we're really, really proud to do the work that we do. Food rescue, like Winnie said, is not the easiest way, but we think it's the right way. And we think it's what lives our values. We hope that we can continue to find more and more ways to fund nonprofits like Renewal that prioritize doing things the way that honors the farmers and ranchers while also bringing in the best, highest quality and culturally relevant food for our communities. So I guess what we'd like you to take away from today from us is we all want to partner together to help minimize food waste and to protect the environment. We want to fight against hunger for all of our families and our communities. We want to bring our communities closer by volunteering together and building community. We want to educate the public about the importance of minimizing this food waste and finding ways to redirect these resources to people who are still in need and can use those food. And we want to honor the hard work of all the farmers, ranchers, and producers that make the food in the first place. So let's do our best to reduce food waste, and please help us to find ways to create more funding opportunities for nonprofits like ours to do this the way that we think is the best for everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks, Winnie. If anyone has any questions for Philip or Winnie, feel free to drop it in the chat and I'm sure they'll get to you. But until our Q&A session afterwards, we have one more presenter. Dave, Kate, are you on?
I'm here. I believe Dave is with us also.
Camera's working.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I hear you, Dave.
I don't know.
There are 2 of us, so I'll introduce myself briefly. I'm Kate Kurtz. I'm the Organics and Natural Yard Care Program Lead for Seattle Public Utilities. Dave, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Dave Keeney. I'm with King County Wastewater Treatment, and I'm working on biosolids composting.
Great. So Kelsey invited us here today to talk about a project that we actually worked on together collaboratively between Seattle Public Utilities, King County Wastewater Treatment Division, and King County Solid Waste Division, conducting an ecosystem service evaluation of compost. So we quantified the economic benefits of compost. And I'll get into what that means exactly. Next slide, Sam. I want to acknowledge that this was a pretty broad project team. So like I said, it was 3 different agencies that came together to kind of work on this project collaboratively. And we also had a team of consultants because shockingly, Dave, Kelsey, and I are not economists, and this was really an economic evaluation. So we also worked with consultants from Consor, the Keystone Concept, and Equilibrium Economics and Batker Consulting. It was the Equilibrium Economics and Batker Consulting who were the economists in the room, if you will. So next slide, please. Okay, so I said we did an ecosystem services evaluation. So I'll talk a little bit about what that means. So the value of compost specifically has traditionally been valued in 2 broad buckets. So one could be considered the avoided landfill disposal or the tip fee, and the other bucket being the market value, say, per cubic yard of the sold finished material. But we know that compost improves soil quality, and we know that soil is essential to all landscapes for agriculture, wildlife, carbon sequestration, stormwater management, and so much more. And we know that compost therefore offers more value than what is just simply captured in those traditional market values associated with tip fees and sales. Next slide, please, Sam. So to quantify that value, we conducted an ecosystem service evaluation of compost and biosolids, I should say, in King County and Seattle. Um, so, yeah, okay. So what is ecosystem services, right? Or natural capital, which is shown in this like first circle on this slide here. So those are the benefits that we people derive from nature. And these benefits include things like water quality, beauty, flood protection, recreation, climate stability, and, my favorite, healthy soil. And healthy soil and landscapes provide a foundation for a healthy economy. And natural capital and the ecosystem goods and services they produce are essential to economic development and quality of life. And so this is an image on your screen here of an ecosystem service value chain that you might be familiar with already. So healthy forests capture large amounts of good, clean water. And now we have abundant, high quality drinking water, which has an established economic value. So that's an example of an ecosystem service value chain. Next slide, please, Sam. So as referenced earlier, soil is essential to all landscapes, right? All of our terrestrial life really depends on good quality soil. And so to quantify the ecosystem services that compost and biosolids add to helping to restore or enhance soil health, we focused on 5 quantifiable benefits afforded by these soil amendments. And we calculated the economic value of these benefits. So the ones that we focused on here, that we included in this quantification, are flood risk reduction, water supply, carbon sequestration or the greenhouse gas impacts, soil quality and crop yields, and finally soil erosion protection. Next slide. So we grabbed, I think this might be an animated slide, Sam. Can you just go through to the, okay, cool, thank you. So we pulled numbers from a vast array of published literature, and all this is just to say is that we took this is actual published research data where the benefits of applying compost and or biosolids, there was a measurable difference in the soil quality or something like flood protection or soil erosion control, those types of things. And there's a lot of numbers that went into this. So, and finally, I just want to say a little bit about the way that we quantified that economic value. And kind of the math on this slide is simple. The actual math that goes into all of this is remarkably more complicated. But essentially, it can be synthesized down to multiplying the degree of benefit that you're getting from the compost application to the soil by the established monetary value associated with that. So to bring that back to flood risk reduction, for example, flood reduction happens because compost helps soils to be more absorbent. And so it will infiltrate water faster. So you're having less runoff. And so what you have there is you have a degree of benefit, like say a 20% degree benefit. I'm just making that number up right now. And then you can multiply that by known costs that might be associated with flood risk reduction. So one cost might be raising the height of a levee in an area. Or it might be something like insurance payouts to property owners. Needless to say, there are established monetary values associated with flood risk reduction. So, Dave?
Yeah, next slide. Yeah, so I'm going to go through the various things that were pointed out in the study and kind of talk through, you know, what compost is doing and how where the costs came from. So as Kate just said, for flood risk reduction, you're looking at things like levees or dams, and how, you know, the cost of those things versus the cost of adding compost, which is going to absorb water from a rain event, from a heavy rain event, and keep that water from running off into rivers and streams. And as you can see here, that's a pretty substantial cost. Those costs are pretty well established and they're very high. And just to point out that we split all these into two things: bare soil and agriculture. Bare soil is more like a new development or a new road or somewhere where the soil has been totally taken off, and then it's usually reseeded with grass or something, but it's you wouldn't necessarily put compost on it, although in Washington there are laws that say you have to. And then agriculture would be more of a, you know, a farming situation. Next slide. The next one is soil quality. That's looking at think about things like fertilizer or soil conditioners that you would otherwise add to your soil that you don't necessarily need to add, or you don't necessarily need to add as much if you were using compost. Compost is obviously being really high in phosphorus and nitrogen and other chemicals that plants need. It also has a great ability to absorb water and allow plants to be more drought resistant, or to have more water in your soil. So these are values that you would of things that you might add to your soil otherwise if you didn't have compost available. And again, agriculture is higher here because farmers are more likely to use these amendments, whereas some bare soil applications you might not otherwise use it. And next slide, please. The next thing is soil erosion. The costs on this are pretty low, and the reason is mostly because it's hard to quantify what the real costs are of having your soil erode. So the costs that were used to compare the soil erosion to were the costs of remediation, so physically going and getting more dirt or more soil put on the land, but doesn't really account for, you know, the costs of losing infrastructure or things that might happen during a soil erosion event. So because soil erosion can lead to other things like structures collapsing, but that isn't really accounted for in these numbers. So the soil erosion numbers are fairly low. Next slide. Carbon mitigation is the biggest single cost we had. And when you think about that, there's really two effects that are happening. One, when you're using compost, that the organic material that goes into the compost would otherwise be going somewhere else, like a landfill. And in that case, you have a very big carbon cost, because that the organics are turned into methane, and that's a much more potent greenhouse gas than CO2. But on the other side of it, when you add compost to a soil, you're really building that soil environment. So you're allowing microorganisms and macroorganisms to come into the soil and grow and thrive where they otherwise wouldn't necessarily be able to. So you have sort of a multiplying effect, where if you put a ton of carbon in, you can easily get more than a ton of carbon sequestered in the soil, because of those other things they're growing there that wouldn't be able to grow without a healthy soil environment. Next slide. The next one is water supply. Water supply, again, is a fairly low number. And also that's because it's kind of hard to quantify. I mean, you have to think about the cost of drilling a well, or the cost of adding a sluice to get water from a river to your field. Just isn't very high. But it doesn't account for things like areas where you can't actually grow anything because there's not enough water, or you have much lower yields because you don't have enough water. Those are hard to quantify. And again, as Kate mentioned, we're trying to we use established numbers that were in the literature and well quantified and very defensible. So we would expect water supply to be higher, but it's but these are the numbers. These are the best numbers we could get. An example that I thought of when I was thinking about, when I was getting ready for this, was for biosolids. We take a lot of biosolids out to Eastern Washington, and again, that's a organic amendment being added to fields. And when in the dryland wheat farming that biosolids are commonly used at, those farms only get whatever rains on them to grow. And in years we have drought, we have a much higher yield on the fields that got biosolids applications and have gotten biosolids applications for years than we do for fields that don't, because those organics allow the small amounts of water to be trapped and actually get the wheat to grow. And compost works exactly the same way. Next slide. So for this report, we just added all those numbers together and said this is the total value that you're getting from every ton of compost. I mean, you have to think about this total value is much higher than the total cost of compost. I mean, at Cedar Grove, you can get compost for something like $38 a yard to $65 a yard, depending on what kind of compost you're getting. And we're talking about, maybe 4 or 10 times as much in the value that you can get from using compost. Unfortunately, lots of these values are external values, right? This isn't going to increase the cost of compost, because these are things that are benefiting the whole community rather than benefiting the specific land applier. But it's a way to recognize how important it is to use compost as much as we can and to get compost into the community as much as we can. Next slide. At the end of the day, it's all about reducing the amount of food and anything that's going to the landfill and increasing the amount of farming area and gardening space that we have in the state or in the area. Next slide. So thank you very much. And I know that Kate and I are staying around for questions, and I think it's question time now, but we'll go back to Sam.
Yep, it is question time. So if anyone has any questions, I'm gonna stop sharing here. For Kate, Dave, I think Philip had to dip, but Winnie's still on and Heather is still here. Feel free to raise your hand or drop them in the chat. Richard asks, did the carbon mitigation analysis include full cycle analysis of GHG emissions, carbon sequestration from collection, processing, transportation, application?
I'm reading the question. So sequestration, collection, processing, transportation, application. No, it didn't, Richard. Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but it included methane gas avoidance, and soil carbon sequestration. It included the greenhouse gas emissions associated with producing the compost, so running the equipment and all that kind of stuff, but not transportation. But one thing, Richard, is that we did actually use the King County standard, or at least what WTD does, which includes the social cost value associated with carbon.
And even though it wasn't necessarily included in the study, King County has done other analysis where you are including transportation and application, the amount of carbon used for transportation application, and it's always real high on the positive side for using compost. The transportation application doesn't add that much compared to how much you get from sequestration.
Yeah, it's like remarkable how little it is in comparison.
I'm curious what the time horizon is for that sequestration. Like, as a farmer, I've been following this pretty closely, and it seems like there's not a lot of evidence that, say, if I put a ton of compost in my field and till it year after year after year, that there's much evidence that I've made much of much of a difference in the amount of durable carbon that is still in that soil 5 years later. Like over a 1-2 year time horizon, like it seems obvious that I put carbon in the ground. I have now removed carbon from the system, but we know that carbon does not stay in soils due to particular cultivation practices.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
incorporating compost almost always involves tillage, which we do know releases some of the carbon that was already in the soil.
Right. So Tyler, you bring up a great point. And if you look at the carbon sequestration benefits of compost, they the literature has some like really wide ranges, right? Depending on essentially how you're defining soil carbon sequestration. So we know that agricultural activity is a carbon emitting process. It just is, and primarily, like you referenced, because of tillage. Really, the way that we are defining it here, and where like most of the literature that we referenced to calculate this number is looking at the difference between fields that have had compost or biosolids applied and those that have not, but otherwise have been cultivated in the same way. And so it's the difference therein that we are defining as the soil carbon sequestration. And I say we, but it's not just us. This is like this is a camp, right, for how one defines soil carbon sequestration. And it's not about that the molecule of carbon that you're applying with the compost stays there like a coin in a vault that's just going to stay there forever. But really what it does to the amount of carbon that's being stored in that soil over time. So if the compost or biosolids is increasing productivity, like plant growth, and therefore plant roots are putting more carbon into the soil, it's just improving the health and like everything that's growing, the microbes and all of the carbon that's in the soil, generally that's part of it, because it's increasing the amount of carbon that's being stored in that pool, regardless of the initial origins of that particular carbon molecule. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Or did I
And
just
I
get
don't know.
way
I
too
don't know if you caught
wonky?
my talk yesterday, but our
I
farm
didn't,
probably uses
sorry.
more compost per acre than any other farm you would find in Washington. And so,
Uh-huh.
like, I'm a huge advocate of the benefits of compost, but I have yet to find any compelling evidence that I can say definitively I am a carbon sink and will be 10 years down the road that those huge amounts of carbon we're adding to the soil. I couldn't erode away if I'm not continually re-adding that carbon.
Yeah, you could. And it's true. If you keep on tilling, say you apply a huge amount of compost once, and then you keep on tilling your soil, you're going to be losing carbon. The comparison should be if you had two plots side by side.
Yeah.
And WSU has done some of these studies, particularly with biosolids, like really good long-term side by side, replicated trials. But if you have plots that have had the organic amendment and those that haven't, and you otherwise cultivate in the same way, what is the difference in carbon between those two treatments in the long term?
Okay. And I did have another question. So just trying to make sure I understand the numbers you were showing. So you're saying that if a farm applies a ton of compost, it can have up to $400 in economic externalities positively.
Potentially. Right.
Okay.
Right. And things like avoided cost, and that could be avoided cost to your farm, or it could be avoided cost to society, right? If you're talking about something like flood risk mitigation, that might be that might be something that's like, a mile away from you or more, I don't know.
I mean, what's interesting to me about those numbers is every time I look at the statewide agricultural revenue numbers, agricultural land creates about $1,000 in revenue, or less than $1,000 per revenue per acre. So if I look at those numbers, you're telling me if I put in 15 tons of compost per acre, which is sort of the upper threshold that's typically recommended for compost applications, that I would actually be generating $6,000 of net benefit on an acre that agriculturally only makes me $1,000. So that land may actually be better used as a rainwater collection source and all these other purposes than as agricultural land is sort of how I interpret those numbers.
I mean, I would argue it can be used as both, right? Like if you're adding compost, you're doing those other things, but you're not necessarily getting the benefit from it. It's a
But they are anti-synergistic, especially if you're compost or if you're tilling.
Tyler, I see your point. It's an interesting thought process. We still have to eat.
Yeah. Oh no, I get this. My concern with these, because there's huge conversations happening at the national level, especially about carbon sequestration. And we're talking
Oh,
about,
yeah.
paying farms to sequester carbon. And my worry is that the most effective way for me to do that is pay my neighbor to cut down their forest, because I get a bigger subsidy for putting that carbon into my soil. And it would be very hard for me to make the argument that that is a net positive carbon. So I'm really worried about how we
Oh, I
incentivize and where
see.
that carbon comes from. And there's all kinds of interesting stuff here around the economics. Like if you're a big commodity
Yeah.
farmer and you're only making $400 per acre on hay, and you give me a subsidize of $500 per acre to put compost down, I feel like you're going to end up with some really interesting bastard effects from that.
I see where you're going with that. I am not suggesting
No,
any
no, no, no. And
immediate
I don't think
changes
by
to
any means.
subsidies or anything. Yeah, that's a really interesting way to think about it. Clearly, the better like value to society and the ecosystem service benefits are going to be from maintaining intact forest land. I mean, particularly here
Yeah.
in Western Washington, right? Um, Yeah, but then it's also just a matter of like how can we, well, one from municipality, right? There's like municipal folks or who was like funding and doing this project, right? How can we get a better understanding of the value that our programs are providing
Mhm.
to our region, to our customers, right? More holistically. So that's a really big question. We really want to understand that. Um, but also how can we like really understand better the value that these products are providing to soil and soil
Mhm.
health, and not suggesting that land use changes as a result of it, but what are the tools that we can use to best seek some of the benefits that we want to see in terms of water quality and climate stability, right?
Cool.
I don't
Well,
know.
thank you.
Wow. I'd love to like have dinner with you, Tyler, and just
Happy to anytime. Come
you
out to the
just
farm. I love this stuff. I'm always curious. I'm an engineer, a farmer. I love seeing all the interest. My big takeaway from the last 2 days is I'm super excited that people are paying so much attention to stuff, and I'm also kind of terrified of some of the potential knock-on effects of
yeah.
these very complicated problems. It's like compost is both, for me, an incredible source of nutrition and an incredible potential vector of contamination in my fields. Like, and so
Oh,
making
of
sure that as we
course.
seek all these things, that yeah, a lot of respect.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you for the work. Like this is really interesting stuff, and I'm sure I will be looking at your literature.
Great.
Thanks, Tyler. Heather, I know you had your hand up. Do you still have a question? Okay. Tony, did you have a question?
Yes, I have a question for Phillips and Winnie. First of all, thank you so much for sharing your hard work, and those are amazing work that you do in North King County. My question is, are you open to partner with new other organizations in terms of community referrals, since we have a lot of requests from Seattle area and North King County, and it's so hard for us to serve those communities from our area of work in South King County. Like, is there a way that we can partner so we can refer those communities to access all those amazing food resources and food items that you have?
Tony, I think Philip and Winnie had a conflict. They had to leave a little early,
Oh,
but we can send you their contact information so you
okay.
can ask them directly. Sorry about that.
Tony, I can do a introduction to you both via email.
Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, thanks so much.
All right. Do you have any more questions from the group?
I had another question for Heather.
Yeah.
So I was curious, Heather, you talked about some regulations that are coming down the pipes that will try to address the labeling of compostable plastics. I'm curious how that's being thought about right now, because it seems like there's really like this game of whack-a-mole going on around the labeling of these types of compounds. Just like, okay, we say you can't call them compostable, we say you can't call them biodegradable, and it's like, I'm imagining a month from now I'll be seeing plastics that are biosoluble or, you know, regeneroactive or something, and they will have some new green labeling. And then the other
Right.
thing was around products that aren't specifically labeled as being compostable, because a lot of consumers think that if it's sort of brown and pulpy looking, that it can be composted, but it's very hard to find any kind of food packaging that is not plastic lined or lined with PFAs.
Right. No, you're right. That's why we need to do a little more work on this in the next bill. We are not there yet. It's better than it was in the sense that products may not be marketed at this point right now as compostable in Washington State unless they really are. They cannot use the term biodegradable. That's essentially an illegal term in Washington right now. So we at least have got that. So they can only use the term compostable. But the color is very misleading and confusing to the public. You're completely right. We are not there yet. And this is one of our biggest bugaboos for in terms of the confusion and the contamination. So you're right, but it is better than it was.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'm glad it is being acknowledged. Like this is
Yeah.
something we've dealt with on the farm quite a bit.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Rick.
Yeah, a question for Heather. Heather, in your presentation, one of the pieces of legislation, or one of the things was to work on banning clopyralid, and the at least I think two of those other herbicides are in the same family, maybe all four, maybe in the same family. But I was under the impression that clopyralid was at least partially banned. Is this looking for a full ban on all of these? I'm just curious as to where it's coming into the composting system. These are broadleaf herbicides, so only used on grass crops, small grains, or corn. So the primary route of contamination would be through, as I see it, through grass hay or through straw that would end up either used on a farm, or and then in the taken to a compost facility, or possibly grass hay primarily for horses or zoos that would also end up in the waste stream. The challenge is that most composting facilities are not taking livestock waste, so I'm not sure that it's making. I'm just curious as to how can you provide a little more compost as where the problem's coming from and what that's looking to target?
Sure. Yeah. So first off, it's not banning the chemical. The chemical can still be used. And that's through a different process that, we're not touching. So all we're talking about is feedstock. And you're right. It may not be that big a problem in some areas, but it is still being a problem. I just saw a media article about it like last week about it. So it is still a problem in some areas. So what we're trying to do is basically create a way that if a compost facility starts having a problem, they would then be able to complain and there could be repercussions. But we're not trying to like completely, the system isn't terrible right now. So we're just trying to give that process an enforcement angle so that there can be a follow-up if there is a problem that a facility is hitting right now. Yeah.
I appreciate that. I was curious because I know that clopyralid, it was about 20 years ago that it was a huge issue, and they banned it some, and it seemed to correct most of the problem. But then
That's right.
they found the beauty of these herbicides, and some of you are going to roll your eyes that I'm saying that herbicides are beautiful. The beauty of them is that they're persistent and they're effective at doing what they're supposed to do. Whether we can debate on whether or not we should be using them, stuff like that. But the problem is the plants were susceptible to them at much lower concentrations. And because they were persistent, they did not break down through the composting process where most other herbicides would. So,
right. Or through the gut. So the problem is they come in the manure. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. A lot of things would be broken down in a rumen, which in this case, it is not. Well, and horses don't have a rumen, but anyway, interesting stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good.
Well,
thank you for your comments.
And so this is actually something I mentioned in my talk yesterday that we are worried about as in our farming context. Because like I've been looking at the King County manure match, and we would love to be able to use local manures on our farm. But 100% of the reason I will not touch them is I do not know whether or not these persistent herbicides are in there. And if I apply them to my field, they will kill every crop I grow. And they are incredibly hard to test for. And I cannot prove where that source came in from. So there is no legal repercussion for me to say that and they are problematic in the parts per million levels. And so like
Well,
it turns
this
what
would
is a
create
great
that.
source of carbon into.
Right. This would at least partially create that, because if someone is providing the material to a commercial compost, a permitted compost facility, there would be repercussions if that was discovered.
But so what we're looking to do is make compost on site or use the manures directly in our
Right.
fields.
And in your case, different sit.
Yeah, Tyler, that's a tough thing for you, because even if you went to say a dairy which is primarily feeding alfalfa, and you were getting theirs, is it possible that they fed some of their heifers maybe some grass hay, or were they growing some corn to make corn silage, and were they using one of these on their corn silage that would then be in the manure? So
well, and most producers, like people won't intentionally give me these things, but often a producer won't actually know where their silage came from. They won't know if it was blended or something. And one of the things I've never been sure of is there are these bans in the state, but I would be surprised if there were regulations that stop someone from buying silage in, especially on the margins of the state from, say, Montana or Canada, or up from Oregon, where these regulations may not be there. So like really it is on me as the farmer to basically do this huge exhaustive study and have to meet every member of the supply chain to make sure that I'm not poisoning my field, which and we're a small player in all this. And I'm not here to say that these have no place in the ag system, because I also understand that they use them for a reason.
Right. I mean, silage wouldn't be transported very far, but you are correct that, on the margins, somebody from Walla Walla might bring something across the state line from Oregon, in terms of silage being hauled from Central Oregon to, Snohomish County or something. That's unlikely because it's highly perishable. But you're right. It makes your job trying to trace this stuff really difficult when the farmers can't even, so you'd have to find probably a small producer that is feeding, local hay that has no herbicides on it, and or is feeding exclusively alfalfa or, clover hay, so that you can say, hey, I know that, these particular chemicals weren't used on it. So I won't take any more time, but I don't envy your source tracking.
Do you have any more questions from the group? If not, I will.
You muted yourself somehow, Sam.
I will pass it off to you.
Okay.
Wrapping up.
So great discussion, everyone. Really thank you for engaging. So I want to thank all of our speakers from yesterday and today for your time and your commitment into sharing your work. And thank you all for attending to learn from one another. We will have now an optional networking breakout session portion of our event for the speakers who are able to continue on with us. We'll keep them open until about 12:15 or so, give you about 45 minutes to self-select into a breakout room where each speaker will have one of their own rooms. Shortly at the bottom of your Zoom screen, a little like box, 4 boxes will pop up with the word breakout rooms. And you can click on that and a window should pop up and you can self-select into a room. If there's not a particular speaker or topic area that you're interested in talking about, let me go to your question, Rick, really quick. The question is the breakout for today's speakers, or will it include those from yesterday that are in attendance? That is up, I guess, to our speakers from yesterday. We didn't actually clarify that. We can do that optionally, or we'll have an additional room for non-speakers to meet. So try one of those if those aren't there. But yeah, you can choose which room you'd like to be in and talk with folks till about 12:15, network. And then when you do eventually leave us today, when you leave the meeting, you'll get a pop-up notification to take a survey to reflect on yesterday and today's summit. We really appreciate your feedback. A lot of last year was very helpful in our design of this year's. If you're not able to fill it out at this time, we will also include a link to that in our thank you email that will come in the coming days. That email will also include the recordings once those are processed and ready online, as well as a PDF of all of the presenters' slides. If you are needing any assistance in introductions or contact information and you weren't able to get that from the chat earlier, please feel free to reach out to compost@kingcounty.gov and we'll help you out. So again, thank you so much for everyone being here. Right now, Sam, I am not seeing the breakout room option pop up. There we go. So everyone should have that at the bottom of their screen. If it's the same for me, it's between request captions and your reactions button. So thank you all for being here. Like I said, it'll be open to about 12:15, optional to stay. But we love the conversation. Thank you.